So good afternoon everyone, and welcome to the second of our series this year of Rosh Chodesh talks on the new format. Last time we had Rabbi Jonathan Wittenberg from the Masorti movement, and today, in keeping with our cross-communal ethos, we move to the Reform movement. Very, very pleased to introduce someone who, if you don't know him already, a number of you, particularly if you're associated with the Reform movement, will, I expect and hope, get to know more over time. Rabbi Benji Stanley is the rabbi for young adults at the Reform movement, working mostly with adults on their way back from university and creating wonderful Jewish experiences and opportunities. He trained down the road from here at the Leo Beck College and is still based there at the Sternberg Centre and in Finchley. He's a fellow of New York's Yeshivat Hadar, studied English at Oxford, passionate, as you will, I'm sure, be about to discover, about a Judaism rooted on the one hand in text and on the other hand in the world as we live it and experience it. He's been in RSY Netzer as his youth movement, worked for a couple of years with them, and now does leadership, education and programming. We are delighted to have him with us today, so please will you give him a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. It's really lovely to be here. Can you hear me at the back? You can hear me? Great. So I want to talk about something that I hope is relevant to you, which is learning and reading, and the point of learning and the way we do learning. So most of you, it's your main activity. You learn most of the day, most days of the week. So what's the point in that? I wonder, what is the point? And Ben warned me not to do any interaction, but I'm going to try it. Couple hands. What's the point in learning? Why? Ray, what's your name?
Tepo.
Go ahead.
Have a better future.
To have a better future. Okay, great. Just one or two others. One word answers are fine. What's the point in learning? Go ahead.
To make informed choices.
Make informed choices. Great, thank you. A follow-on question: Does learning or reading, does it make you a better person? Does that work? Does learning? I mean, we would assume maybe it does, right? Because it seems to be what a lot of our parents care about. Get into a good university. There must be an assumption there that learning, good schools, good universities, have some kind of effect on the way you behave in the world. But is that real? Does learning or does reading, does it make you a better person? If you think it does, just stick up a hand. Learning makes you a better person. Stick up a hand. Hi. I want to get a sense of opinions in the room. Okay, that looks to me like less than half. If you think learning or reading doesn't necessarily make you a better person, put up your hands. That's maybe even more. Okay, and if you're not sure, not sure is often a good place to stand. I'm not sure. It's worth saying at the Wannsee conference, which was the conference in Germany in which it said that the final solution was decided. There's some historical debate about this, but the idea of the end of the Jews. At that conference, there were 16 members of Nazi high command, and 8 of them had PhDs. 8 of them had devoted huge amounts of their life to learning. Goebbels, the head of propaganda for the Nazis, had 3 PhDs. Right, so I think we really need to be careful in whether we assume or not that learning makes us a better person. And I just want to share with you a few short stories, experiences, and one teaching which I hope illustrates a Jewish way of reading which I think can make us better. And this is a way of reading that I think is open to every human being, but I learnt it from my Judaism. Essentially, I think Judaism teaches that we should be intellectual, but that anyone can be intellectual. That we should read, we must read, but that anyone can read. Story number 1. Last week, as rabbi for young adults for Reform Judaism, someone contacted me because they weren't sure if they believed in God, they had been in a relationship where the person had really pushed them, why does Judaism matter to you? And they contacted me in a bit of a panic, saying, I grew up identifying as Jewish, but I don't really know what it means to me. And I think that's something that a lot of us experience. I have this around me, but I don't know what it means. And we met up a couple of times, and last week, I decided to try and look at a text with her, the beginning of a blessing of the Amidah, to try and see what sort of a God comes out of this text. And we were having a great conversation, sitting there. And she had said she wanted to explore ideas of God and Judaism. And then I said, I've brought a text so that we can look at this. And I want you to do what you said you would do, Jane. You said that you would not leave yourself at the door. Any question you have, you would bring it to this. You want this to affect your life and your behaviour. So this isn't going to be learning like it was for you at school, dare I say. Every question you bring in. And she said to me, I want to tell you right away, it was just me and her, I want to tell you, I'm nervous. I'm not sure I'm going to have anything to contribute to this discussion. As soon as I brought out a piece of paper, this bright 27-year-old, who has a really great job in design, said, I don't know that I'll be able to come up with the questions, and seeing this text will make me scared. And so I said, okay, and we got the text, and we just moved it to the side. And we discussed it, but it was all out loud. And every word and every line, I said, what do you make of that? What questions does that cause you? And we had a discussion about the text, which she didn't think she could have, because she doesn't think, in her words, that she's book smart. And she's used to discussions always being dominated by people who kind of thrived in their schools. I want to say, I think that everyone in this room is bright. I think that everyone in this room has the capability to engage in a conversation about the world and what they care about, to ask questions. And yet, sometimes, and maybe not here, but sometimes our education does us a certain amount of damage. Sometimes it makes us think that we can't engage, that we can't read, that reading is for a select few, rather than just a way of having a conversation. Story number 2. So I remember when I was at school, and I was really nervous the first year or so, because I had gone to a little school until I was 13, and then I found myself in this really big school across London, and I wasn't very confident that I could contribute to class. And so when it came to writing English essays, creative essays, or analysing books, which I thought I probably liked, I tried really hard, and I would write out the essay and then I would bring it to my dad, and I would read it in front of my dad. And my dad, he was in advertising, he's smart, and he's got a good way of putting things. He would always say it simpler, say it simpler. And it would sometimes feel to me like he was being quite critical, so I'd get angry, and I wasn't very grateful for the advice he was giving, but it was good advice. And then I would go back into the next room, and I would change bits of the essay, and I would bring it into school, and it helped me to have a voice. It helped me to feel that I could do it. Now, my dad turned 88 just at the end of December. And what I loved about that experience of learning and reading with my dad is that it was interaction with my father that I still treasure. It was as much about the relationship with the person as it was about the thing we were discussing. Story number 3. The time that I've most loved learning was when I learnt in New York for a year. I was learning what's called a yeshiva, which just means sitting, but a traditional Jewish text study environment. And in many ways it was hard. I had to get in at 7:30 in the morning. It often didn't end until 9 in the evening. There were about 20 of us, and in the morning we would study Talmud together. And that also sometimes made me feel not smart. You know, there's an idea that whenever you pick up a page of Jewish text, it reminds you how not smart you are. And I would sit opposite my chavruta, chaver means friend, so my study buddy, and for 3 hours in the morning, we would try and figure out this text. Now, Talmud is a collection of conversations built up over 500, 600 years and written down about 1,000 years ago. And written down in a mixture of Hebrew and Aramaic. It's very difficult to understand what's going on. And often you just want to give up. But you're sitting there opposite that person with the text in the middle, asking all your questions out loud. Why do I care about this? What does this mean? What does that word mean? What does that line mean? You, Rachel, my study buddy, my chavruta, what do you think of that? For hours in the morning. And then once a week in the afternoon, I went to a nursing home. It was part of the program. And I was really nervous because the nursing home had this floor with people with dementia. And that was the floor I was assigned. So when you have dementia, often what you're communicating isn't so clear. So I remember the first time I stepped onto that floor, the lift opened, and an elderly Russian woman just went to hug me. And then for weeks, every week when I visited, we would walk, me and this woman would walk up and down the corridor together, up and down the corridor together. And she would speak lots and lots to me in Russian. And I would respond and nod, and I don't speak a word of Russian. Not a word of Russian. And I just had to be patient and try and be kind to this person next to me. And just... Is that like a 5-minute warning? And then the first time on that floor that I walked into the common room, it was full of about 40 or 50 people who were living there, all shouting out in different languages. And it sometimes feels like they're shouting at you as well. And I had to be brave and just sometimes go and sit with someone. And even if I couldn't understand what they were saying, because the sentences seemed disconnected, because it made no sense, I would sit and be patient. And that year in New York, I felt heavily that the process of learning stories and texts in the morning and sitting with someone in the afternoon was connected. It helped me to be patient. It helped me to trust the thing in front of me, whether it was words from a person or words from a person 1,000 years ago, written in a text. Those are the three stories. Someone who, because of their experiences, thinks that they can't have a conversation, number one. Number two, the way that learning, when it's in conversation with someone who you care about, can feel deeply meaningful. And number three, the way that learning can be not only across from someone with another human being, but can give you patience, can teach you to sit with something that you don't entirely understand. There's a teaching from the Talmud that I love. It's in Sota 14a, Torah Techilata Gemilut Hasadim V'Sofa Gemilut Hasadim. Torah, or learning, its beginning is the act of loving kindness, and its end is the act of loving kindness. And for me, that teaches me that learning and reading can make you a better person if you come to it determined that it will make you a better person. The beginning of learning is not turning up. The beginning of learning is thinking about who you are and how you want to be better. The end of learning is not the end of a class. The end of learning is when you're being better in your day-to-day life. So just to characterize some of the ways of learning that I think are valuable, and I want to encourage you to start doing this practically. Learn with someone. Learn with someone. Of course you need to do things by yourself. Of course you need to write essays. But learning often happens best when you sit with a parent or with a friend or with a teacher and have a conversation. So learn out loud. Of course sometimes you need to read silently in order to get through it. But unless you learn out loud, you'll never hear that learning and think, what does it mean to me? You'll never be able to quote. Learn in a way that you're thinking, how does this affect the way I'm going to be when I leave school? How does this affect the way I'm going to treat my family? Learn in a way that you're determined that it should practically make you a better person. And I guess just my final challenge, so for me, I found this in Judaism. I studied English literature and I loved it. And there was a time at university when I was doing English literature and I was trying to do social responsibility, which was partly that Tikkun Olam stuff that I got out of RSY Netzer. So I was staying up late to answer the phone to people who might be distressed. And I was doing that sort of stuff. And I was trying to make friends. And all those activities seemed to have little to do with each other. The reading, the making friends, the being responsible. And actually each of them could leave you a little bit drained. They could just leave you tired, leave you feeling lonely. So I went into this Jewish stuff, thinking that maybe reading, being responsible, and actually having meaningful relationships can come together in the Jewish stuff. And I've not been disappointed. I've not been disappointed. With young adults, people who are incredibly successful, they're now meeting up every week or 2 weeks with my help to have conversations about things that matter to them. Meaningful conversations, meaningful learning. My challenge to you is not to find yourself in 11 years' time, 12 years' time, sitting in a pub, feeling that actually you can't talk, you can't have a conversation, you can't read a text. Because that reading and those conversations are things that every one of us is capable of. Things that, in my opinion, Judaism can't really exist about. If you thought Judaism was about services, then it's a mistake. It's a mistake. Services are a key part of Judaism. But Judaism is about learning. Judaism's an educational tradition. And for me, it's a beautiful educational tradition because it's one that as long as you do it with a friend, out loud, thinking about how it will affect your life, it's a tradition that's open to all of us.